Hey guys, Matthew here once again. Wanted to make a video with a bit of bad news, a bit of worse news, and then something kind of nice to end off with. So to start with, I did want to talk about the Huntress, what I've been doing with it, the Twister build that we've been doing, and the fact that it got basically bug fixed. So it was extremely powerful, it turns out, but not for the reasons that we thought. Turns out it was bugged where it would gain a lot of extra elemental damage for more projectiles that you would fire out, consecutively giving 50% more pretty much for every single additional proj, meaning that if we were firing out 20 proges like we were, one of those proj is doing something like 1,000% more damage. And it meant that we were doing way more damage than we were supposed to be doing with this Twister sort of build, and it got fixed overnight, meaning that the character that I basically ended up building, which was based heavily around these Twisters, so I was using Frostbolt, throwing out this Frostbolt, I was channeling up some Whirlwind things, stacks, and throwing out a fuckload of Twisters. That was the build I was playing. It was doing pretty well. It got to maps, and it with literally 0 resists. I had like 2 fire resists, like fucking 5 cold resist, whatever. Almost no evasion, almost no life. With all of that, I was just blasting through maps and doing what I thought was a pretty good job for the absolutely no level of gear that I had. It definitely felt like it was a bit stronger than it should be for various reasons. Maybe it was shotgunning more. Turns out it was bugged and was doing way more damage. But yeah, the build that I was playing and that was doing really well, as can be seen in the slight bit of damage and footage here, was completely gutted overnight. And it's fair. It's very heavily bugged. But what that meant for the character was that essentially, it meant I needed to start having real stats and real gear. I could no longer just cheese off of the fact that the skill was broken and insanely strong. So it went from all that type of gameplay to this overnight, where still firing off lots of tornadoes, still firing off combos and stuff, but it wasn't guaranteed to shit on everything at all times. It then meant that it mattered whether or not I crit, and as far as I could tell, tornadoes do an all or nothing crit. So if you got 30% crit chance, then you got a 1 in 3 chance to fire out all these critting tornadoes that do good damage. My crit wasn't that high, so it felt pretty awkward, firing off tornadoes that weren't doing that much damage. It meant that I actually had to care about my gear, and I had to start doing a bit of ramping towards the attack speed, the crit multi, that sort of stuff. And also care about my default attack, which is a bit unfortunate, but that ended up being a bit more of my single target too. So in the end, my character was an absolute dumpster fire of gear. It was worth nothing. It had almost no stats, but it was still basically mapping well enough up to tier 5 that I could stomach it well enough. And yes, I think the Twister builds are still possible. You can make one like this with cold. You can make one with lightning and lightning boots, to just drop shocked ground, or use your minion to have certain ground, or you can use fire trail boots to have fire tornadoes, and it's a bit more of a streamlined process than just plain frost bolting. It's still very possible. Some people are still playing the Twister build. I just kind of struggled to wrap my head around being a 10th as powerful all of a sudden while pulling off the same kind of combo. So I came across some unique map. It had a bunch of gold. This is just this thing here. Don't want to spoil the whole thing, but walked out of there with an extra 700,000 gold or so that was kind of cool. But overall, I just couldn't really wrap my head around wanting to still keep playing the build that I was just then playing, but it's a 10th of its power while still doing the same kind of combo. And the final straw was when I end up doing this map, which I hated in the past. It seems like it's better. There's way less trees and obstructions, but there's still lots of little shrubs and shrubbery all the fuck over the place, and I'm talking all over the place. And my whirling strike or whirling attack, whatever it is, my combo, kept getting stuck on these, and it was just so infuriating that once I was thinking about my reroll to a Thorns build, I just decided to go ahead and do it. We were talking about Thorns, and I was thinking about Thorns, and I'm just yeah, fuck it. I'll play some more Huntress another time, because I don't really want to just change build entirely. I like leveling with an entire build, so I could just change to Lightning Spears and start playing that, but I didn't really like that either. I would rather start a whole new character for a whole new build. So in essence, I didn't really feel like doing this much more anymore, since I didn't have much currency, much gear to do, and moved on to Thorns. But we get to the worst news, I suppose, which is the what we're working on post. So this one was put out this morning. It's always good to pretty quickly get direct contact with, GGG, the developers, know what they're thinking, what we're, getting, what their reaction to our reaction, all that is. But this one, while it has some good stuff, it also had basically the first time I was truly kind of worried and concerned for what's going on and the direction to follow, because yeah, it wasn't good for at least one of these things. So I want to go over pretty much most of it, but then really talk about the one particular issue. So what we're working on is they're saying that gameplay's feeling a bit slow, which obviously that's what a lot of people are reporting, and how a lot of people are feeling. Monster life too high, player damage too low, errors taking too long. That's pretty on point. That's what's happening. So let's start out by just talking about the Huntress specific concerns, which, as I pointed out in my last video, a lot of that has to do with early gameplay requiring certain combos, requiring frenzies, and requiring you to parry to kind of set up damage. They acknowledge that, which is at least a start. And then, of course, in some other kind of roundabout way, fix it by saying they're going to give you a skill to generate a frenzy on kill with that skill. You use that skill when something's about to die, get a frenzy, and then that means you don't necessarily have to parry to generate frenzies for these skills in the early game. Because in the late game, as I've mentioned, a lot of these problems go away when you can start fixing these problems with the tools at your disposal. Once you're geared enough, or once you've got the right skills and the right combos, you don't necessarily have to generate frenzies that much. You don't necessarily have to do specific combos. You can just mostly set it up well enough to just start right-clicking and running around. Early on, that's not really an option. You are kind of forced into this weird gameplay shit. And yeah, that's only going to be a little bit better, but it's still going to be pretty much a problem thanks to the skill. It's just going to be a sidestep solution. The other problem here that isn't necessarily being addressed, they're just saying that people don't necessarily like melee range and, the playstyle of melee and range, like comboing that much, which, yeah, it's something, but mostly it's just like people don't like feeling super weak. And the big problem with Huntress in particular, when you're first starting out with no gear, first playthrough, is it's super fucking weak. Like almost all of the builds and all of the skills that you try out are extremely weak. It just does not feel impactful. It does not feel like it does anything for the steps you take to get to that skill. And you can start feeling kind of weak on your character because your gear tapers off or whatever, and you think maybe I'll try some other skills, try some other builds, and you try those other skills and they're doing nothing, like literal nothing. It doesn't make sense that the baseline level of power for Huntress in particular is so low. Like you really should be trying skills. You should be getting to that next skill level threshold, level fucking 11 skills or whatever, which is like level 50 or some shit. Getting to that threshold, trying that new skill and just going, holy fuck, that skill's sick, instead of going, wow, that is a cool looking skill, but it still does nothing. So that's a bit of a problem, the baseline. They haven't really addressed that. And likewise, like even the highest tier skill, the Viper spear stab thing, it's bugged right now to the point of crashing. So you only crash when you use it. So you can't even use one of the highest tier skills. So that it's there's some sort of improvement here, but it's still not really addressing the overall concern of how sort of clumsy early on Huntress is, and also how weak it is. So it's a bit not really landing the mark. The player minion stuff I don't really know too much about. I know that minions have been struggling. They're not very powerful. They die quickly. That's being kind of addressed in early game because of some stuff that they changed at some point in the past, and they're kind of making it a bit better. But apparently the end game minion stuff is still going to be pretty bad. It hasn't really been addressed here. So that's a bit of a concern as well for a lot of people that love minion play, but I don't really know too much about that. Still, it's not touching on the best of this type of an issue, so it's a bit of a concern. Monster life too high, they already adjusted that because it was apparently too high throughout the campaign in particular, so they did that by nerfing it by 25%. They're still going to keep recalibrating some stuff they did for rares and whites. Their elites and their minions sort of thing. Apparently those had way too much life and they already changed those. So those are some good steps. I'd say this is probably one of the most, on point kind of points here that they've actually addressed. This is the one that had me very concerned, large area sizes. It's a concern that's been going through all of PoE2 since the start. It's not new, it's not fresh. So it's very ongoing and apparent. Many players are reporting the areas feel like they are too large. Normally when this is the case, the main reason is due to other concerns such as monster life or player damage being incorrect, or just the lack of entertaining content in the area. However, we are checking to see if there are any other outliers that players are spending too long in to see if any changes in area need to happen. In the meantime, we did notice there are some areas that don't have sufficient checkpoints, so we're doing a pass of adding some more of these. So the very first thing, when I read this, I was just like, are you fucking serious? I actually straight up felt like I was being gaslighted here. Because yes, like I said, this is an apparent problem that all of us have felt, and it's real. A lot of the zones, especially, as everyone will mention, in Act 3, when you first get to Act 3, are extremely large. It's not that you're not doing enough damage. It's not that mobs, have too much life. It's not the fact that there's not enough, little bits of content to interact with. It's that the zones are fucking massive, and you get lost and you backtrack and you have to clear this full fucking thing. There's a lot of culprits in Act 3. There's plenty of culprits in Act 1 and 2 as well, but it doesn't feel quite as bad. And yet, we're being told that, like before, because we have been told this before. We've listened to interviews and Q&As and shit where Jonathan has been like, yeah, look, we get it. You guys might think it's too large, but it typically means, and he's said this exact thing before. And then once again getting this feedback, once again getting told the exact same thing. This actually has a real cause for concern for me because it is real. And it is being kind of swept to the side, and it makes me question whether or not he is actually playing the game. Like a lot of people are complaining about, do these guys play the game? I reckon they've still got playtesters. I reckon they're still playing the game stuff. But when do you think the last time Jonathan had actually sat down and done a campaign playthrough was? And I would answer maybe even fucking never in one full sitting, because he's, a very busy guy and on top of all of everything, and probably comes in and does all these issues and everything. Sitting down and playing the full campaign for like 15 to 20 hours is a big time commitment, and it can beat you down when you're going through these zones, when you're playing Huntress in particular, and it definitely does feel very large. One of the other things they're saying is they're just going to add checkpoints, right? They're going to do more checkpoints and stuff. The checkpoint gaming thing is a very band-aid fix, and it also doesn't really feel good, and it also a lot of the time doesn't really help. You run through a zone, you get stuck somewhere, you have to do a lot of backtrack, the checkpoints aren't there, they're not helping you, and it's just, it's not much of anything. So what this kind of boils down to for me is that I don't think they are building the game right. It's made me kind of realize some shit, that I don't think they're building this game through the campaign to be much of an ARPG. It really does feel at this point, based off of a lot of other people's complaining and feedback and what I've been thinking about, it really does feel like it's kind of a story mode game at the moment, which is like fine for the first playthrough and it feels good, and that's why we all kind of felt good and went, hey, campaign's cool. When it first came out, it felt really nice. It's big, whatever, it's all new, you're exploring it, but it's not something you really want to redo almost ever. Which is what a story mode game is, right? You play through it once and you're like, that was fun, let's move on. The problem here is it's kind of like that, where it's very long. There's, all these new things that you're learning and exploring that are just going to feel very vastly empty and repetitive because of how they are and the fact that you're just waiting to get to endgame. I can choke down campaigns because I kind of like campaigns. I'm exploring my new builds and there's an end goal. And yet, even I can still feel that some of these zones are very big and they're just not addressing it at all. They're just saying we should, tone down monster life or give you more damage or more content. One of the other ways you can very much feel that large zones are too large and maps are too large is picking up an accelerate shrine in a map and not really feeling a problem anymore. You're just like, okay, this is kind of normal. I'm running around and, map's cleared quick enough. And what that indicates to you is that either the zones are too large or we're way too slow. So you either have to give us some more speed and then the zones won't feel as large, or you have to shrink the zones and then we, don't mind feeling that slow because you're not backtracking, you're not exploring empty shit. So the fact that it's more life or damage or something, it makes no fucking sense. I'm actually on tilt reading this and it's annoying. So you rarely see that from me, but this one was a bit of an issue just because I straight up felt like I was being gaslighted into thinking it's not that big. Crashes and stuff, yep, of course, I experience a lot of crashes, whatever. It is what it is. I can't, be too mad about that. Of course, everyone's always doing their best when it comes to technical issues. And, it's gotten better. I'm crashing less. I crashed like 100 times on day one, maybe like 20 times on day two, maybe like 10 times today. So it's getting better for me, but, it is what it is. That's kind of a whatever. And then some, very small quality of life, kind of whatever. Neither here nor there. So it's some pretty concerning stuff. If this is basically the direction of the game, and then all of this as well, like the next class is going to be based around power charges, and you have to fucking do all these combos and make sure you've got your generator in tow, and then you can finally do an attack, and then the attack isn't that good until you've got all the right gear. I'm not sure it's going to be a very good progress from here on out. And especially, like the large area size thing, I really think that one kind of needs to be addressed at this point in a better way than this. Because, people are struggling to want to redo the campaign already, and it's only like the second time around, the second league. You should, like, at the very least, be feeling like it's a bit of a chore, not like you just straight up don't want to do it because it's just too much effort, it's too much work, and the entire thing feels like work. Like, there's lots to say there. I think I've said as much as I can or enough without getting too repetitive, but it is a bit concerning. This is probably the most, as lots of complaints have said, probably the most what I feel they've been out of touch with this sort of thing before, and hopefully that goes in some kind of better direction in the future. So I'm going to end on a more positive note, and that is with the Thorns build that is back, and back better than ever. So if you remember last time around when we played PoE1, there was some Thorns action. There was a bit of Thorns interaction on passive tree and stuff, and I gave it a shot. And I'm a Thorns enjoyer. I like the idea of it. But it was definitely lacking some support. It was lacking some actual source to make it a proper archetype in this game. And I think, surprisingly enough, real development time went towards this in this patch 0.20 to make Thorns a much more viable product. And it's actually some very good changes, and probably one of the biggest winners of this patch overall. It's Thorns. So as you can see, we actually have a bit more Thorns damage and a bit more control over our damage this time around, instead of just waiting for things to purely hit us. Now, my build is still very much in its infancy, and there's going to be, I think, a lot more scaling to go and a lot more stuff to try out. But essentially, there's a bit better Thorns uniques now, and on top of that, there are some supports. And it's not very hard to get this sort of setup going, especially throughout the campaign. All you need is some unique boots. You don't really need a unique chest, but it helps for a bit of extra Thorns. And then the hat that lets all damage apply to you against Thorns. So not just melee, but also ranged and projectiles and spells and shit like that. But there are new supports now that basically will mean that you apply your Thorns damage when you hit, if you've been hit somewhat recently. So it's not, a super overpowered be-all, end-all where you can just apply your Thorns damage always. You still have to get kind of hit, but you at the very least apply much more of your damage much more routinely than you did before. It creates a much more engaging playstyle, and one where you've got a bit more control over your own damage instead of just waiting for things to hit you, and it's really quite powerful. It's got the extra AoE, it's got applying your actual Thorns damage. Thorns damage itself got buffed. We look prettier in a nice little robe we just picked up. There's a good few things that are good for Thorns, and I haven't even tried the new stuff, which is the Caltrops, which is some stuff you drop when you dodge roll, and I think that maybe has some potential as well. I am, of course, memeing it up a bit with my character, and I went the blacksmith route because I just figured there'd be nothing funnier than, going into the toughest enemy and boss fights and stuff and just sitting there smithing a weapon with the absolute meme dogshit skill that is that weaponsmith thing, while everything around me kills itself against me. So I'm actually using it to my advantage, and it's a bit of a meme. But I think Thorns is fairly versatile, like a lot of different ascendancies can do it, and there's also a good few different ways of building Thorns. So my example won't necessarily be what someone else's example is, but I think there's a good few ways of doing it, and it feels pretty damn viable. I think it should provide a nice campaign clear and good early map gaming as well. But we'll see where it goes from here, because I fully expect this to be a build that can do quite a lot of things and have a lot of fun with. I don't know exactly how far it can go, but it's promising and it's a fun one. So the good news is there's absolutely still fun there to be had in PoE2, and I think the game itself can still become one of the greats, like, of all time, by all means. It could overtake PoE1, it could become the best RPG. It just really does need a bit of divergence from the quote-unquote vision, because at the moment it definitely feels like they're building a game for more of design-wise, they're building a game for more theoretical design choice than for actual practical gameplay. That's what I'm worried about as of reading this post today, and we'll see how things go. Hopefully, you know, we get some positive outlook in the future, but for now, that one has me feeling a bit despair. Either way, Thorns, next video will probably be pretty freaking pog, so look out for that one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.